Wonderful. So yeah, thank you. There's been some really, really interesting presentations this morning, and from people within the education sector who are probably far more qualified. I think what I'm going to try and do here is tackle things that are perhaps a little different. We're coming at it from a slightly different place, but hopefully some useful takeouts that you can apply to your thinking. This is about how we engage young people around food, and we're going to focus on three main takeouts or concepts that we apply to everything we do. So hopefully, if that slide is moving on, let's have a little look at who it is we're talking about. Sorted has perhaps a slightly older demographic than the students that you guys will be teaching, but I think we come from a similar kind of place as a demographic when it comes to concepts and approaches and behaviours. So millennial and Gen Z is the technical kind of category of people. But I think it's more about an approach to food, an approach to life, which is digital native. Like I just said, not necessarily digitally savvy, but digitally native, which means that it's a generation who have grown up with smartphones in our pockets. If they're not in our pockets, then that's probably because they're already in our hands. And this access to a ton of information online, both good, biased and skewed, and sometimes bad or wrong information, it's all out there and it's all at our fingertips. And we've not really known anything before that. I'm very much on the cusp of that in the millennial zone, and some of the things that Roy was talking about right at the start. I remember having a CD-ROM from B&F in primary school that we'd have to plug into the one desktop in the corner of the room. But I think right now we're talking about digitally native and always active online kind of people, which is why we describe them as part of the thumb evolution. And that's an odd phrase, but the thumb evolution is that we actually undertake an awful lot of food decisions every single day with our thumbs. So tapping, typing, swiping, whether that's consuming food content, ordering food from delivery apps or online food groceries, taking photos of food and uploading them to social media. So much of what we do happens with our thumbs, and that is in part because we are hypersocial, and that is really an addiction to social media. But the reason this happens is that our social media feeds become an extension of our own personalities. So with these kind of behaviors in mind, we have been on a journey for over a decade now to work out how we engage this generation around food. And hopefully the three learnings that we have, you'll be able to take away and apply in the classroom as well. Quick snapshot of Sorted. Four co-founders. We met 23 years ago at school. So we grew up together, year 7 at school we met, and it's this friendship that really is at the core of what we do even still today. The team has grown. There's even twice that number now. There's just over 20 of us who work from a studio in East London. But the real value is this connection we have to a global community of foodies using online platforms. So over 3 million foodies who, most importantly, voluntarily choose to engage in this food content. And that, I think, is where it sits slightly differently to in schools and the curriculum, where it is part of the system. This is extra and voluntary, and yet people are choosing to engage. Video content is our bag. So with that in mind, I am just going to quickly play a short 90-second video that will summarize what we do much better than I can as I waffle on.
Do you like food? Of course you do. It's beautiful, delicious and exciting. It's the world's most talked about subject. But with so much information, it's confusing. Who do you trust? What do I do? We are Sorted. What started with lifelong mates cooking together in London has grown into millions of people across the world joining in and building their own friendships around food. Together we sift through the noise and concentrate on sharing great food. We inspire each other to get smart in the kitchen and celebrate the stories of the people, passion and secrets behind the food we love. Wow. We explore the trends that are happening today and tomorrow. Plus, we bring you the best personalised eating experiences in your local town. Best donut I've ever had, easily. There are now over 2 million members of Sorted who watch more than 30,000 hours of content every day. But they don't just watch, they chat, they share their opinions and they help us all make better choices for what we all put in our mouths. We work with you and top brands to bring your friends and family together around what you cook, eat and watch. Treat us like your best friend in food. Sorted.
And with a bit of luck, that final phrase is the one that I really want people to take away, and that's be your best friend in food. It's our first nugget, and it's our first approach that we always apply to every bit of content. Sorted began around a pub table about 12 years ago. We were all students at the time in higher education, and we did something for students by students. But as a thought exercise, I know there's hundreds of people tuned in today. It's Saturday lunchtime, but imagine now this evening you've got a table booked at your local pub, and you can invite 4 friends. Out of all the people you know, all of your friends, all of your acquaintances, family, whatever, who are those 4 people that you're choosing to invite? Because everybody on the call will have a different list of people they will be inviting, but I would have thought they all share the same values, and it's these values that create the pillars of every piece of content around food that we ever publish. So namely, you'll pick people that are loyal, I think that goes without saying, but also people that have the qualities of laughter. We don't take ourselves too seriously at Sorted. I think it's really important that when we're talking about food, we don't make it too serious. It's okay to have a laugh around the topic. Trust, I think, goes without saying, but also don't preach to you. It's very rare that the people you choose to sit at your table will be the ones who come and are always banging on about the same thing and trying to get you to convert. If they do that time and time again, increasingly, it's their invitation that will get lost in the post. So rather than preach, be authentic and real and have proper conversations. You pick people who are reliable, but also people who will enrich your life. So similar attitudes and approaches to food and to all things in life, but that aren't always the same, because debate and conversation is really, really healthy, much better than just preaching. And finally, the friends you invite won't be ones you've had to buy or you have to pay to be there. And I think that's really important, that you have this kind of organic relationship. It's not forced and it's not pressed upon people. And I think those attitudes and approaches to friendship is what we put at the core of everything we do. And that is the reason that we believe after 10 years, the Sorted Food community is still hugely engaged around a very dynamic conversation of food, which changes every day and every week. But we use these elements on the screen now as a checklist every time we're thinking about what it is we're going to talk about. Does it deliver on all of these things? Because if it does, then it gets much closer to that friendship. And then you can be a best friend in food, and it tends to engage further. So that's the DNA, and that's the first thing to take out of it, the friendship values. The second is, okay, so what are we actually going to talk about? What are the topics and theme that we're going to cover? We've got this audience, we're talking to them in an entertaining and inspiring way. We like to think of it as accidentally educational rather than preaching, but we've got this community who are ready to listen. What is it that we talk about? What are the topics? And there's a really interesting approach using the word craved. Now, forgive me, because we've basically stolen this and reshaped it to make our own. But loss prevention experts, i.e. organisations that measure the value of stolen goods, use the term craved. What is it that is craved by people? And they define it as concealable, removable, available, valuable, enjoyable, and disposable. It's for that reason that, believe it or not, cheese is the most stolen food all over the world. And we really like this approach of working out what it is that people craved, but we have somewhat redefined it because we think there are other approaches that we could explore here. So, but craved we define as those things that hopefully you can still see: durable and practical, starting from the bottom. Enjoyable. It's all very well telling people that a celery salad is the way forward, but if people aren't going to enjoy it, it's just not going to resolve. Valuable is really important, and that's because we're not necessarily talking monetary value, we're talking about a social currency and a social value. So the kind of things that people want to hold up and be proud of, and possibly even share on their social media. It was interesting that Emma was talking about earlier with the kids growing their own and walking back to the classroom with produce held high like trophies. I think that is the value of things that they truly crave. Affordable, it has got to be affordable and accessible. Responsible and sustainable goes without saying now, and Simon tackled an awful lot of that when we come to environmental qualities. But also, and the one we've highlighted there, conversational, I think, should be the most important, because actually, if you can share information with people that they engage with that has all the DNA of friendship, but is conversational to the point where they want to take it outside of the classroom, then that becomes hugely valuable. So food is hugely subjective and very, very personal. One question I get asked quite a lot through interview is, as a chef, what's your favorite recipe? And I honestly don't have one, because I think, like so many people, they change so frequently, from days of the week, times of the day, seasons of the year, mood, budget. What you might have as a favorite or possible recipe at the start of the month might be very different to when you're nearing payday at the end of the month. So out of the thousands of recipes we've ever produced, this one on screen now is kind of a metaphorical slice of humble pie. And that is our approach to food, is there is no one perfect recipe for everyone. You guys teach and you know all of the restrictions and challenges in the classroom, whether it's dietary requirements, lifestyle choices, budget, availability of ingredients, shelf life of ingredients, they all change. So for us, the third thing that we try to offer up in all of our content is not a recipe, but instead a template and a framework to empower and to enable people to have the confidence in the kitchen. Now, one series we did last year was to take some of the fundamentals of cooking and break it down into simple concepts that people can absolutely own at home. And the example that I'm about to play shows you one perfect situation where it's a framework and a tool around pesto.
Now, when it comes to quantities, there is a recipe, I'm sure. For me, I like to go by eye and by hand. And by that, I mean there are 5 ingredients, and you want about a handful of toasted pine nuts, a handful of chopped or grated parmesan, a handful of fresh basil. Much more difficult to measure a handful of oil, but I mean, like, if you were to hold it in a hand, it's about that much. And just really pinky little bit of garlic. Not a handful, that one, just pinky. And with that in mind, it doesn't matter how big or small your hands are, it should still work.
So that is the logic of a template and a framework that empowers people to make a recipe that is personal to them. And the shot you see here is what the video goes on to demonstrate. And that's a completely alternative version using exactly the same principle, that handy rule. The first digit of which is nuts, except you can change that. It doesn't have to be pine nuts, which are quite expensive. You could change that for walnuts, as we have done in this recipe, or macadamia nuts, or pecan nuts, or cashew nuts, whatever you have in your cupboard, whatever's cheap and affordable for you, or actually, maybe it's just whatever you like as a personal preference. The point is, it's one handful of nuts. The second digit is a handful of chopped cheese, and that doesn't have to be Parmesan. Parmesan is actually one of the rare cheeses that isn't entirely vegetarian, but you might want to swap it for a British cheese. It still has to be hard, so you can chop it or crumble it or grate it, but something like a cheddar, or in the case here, we use a Cheshire cheese, a little bit more crumbly, but works a treat. The third digit is the green stuff, the basil, but that could be swapped out for a handful of anything green and tasty that you like. Rocket, or in the case of this recipe on screen, watercress. But it could also be kale that would need just a bit of blanching, or maybe parsley with some dill, or parsley with a bit of mint. The point is you can personalize it and you can make it accessible, because what it isn't is a recipe. It's just a framework to make pesto. So a handful of nuts, a handful of cheese, a handful of something green, a handful of oil. We used rapeseed oil, a British oil rather than an olive oil, and still that little pinky of garlic. And once you've empowered people to understand the principle of a recipe like pesto, rather than the prescriptive recipe of pesto, then actually there are so many variations, and you could make a different pesto every single month for an entire year just by swapping out some of those ingredients and using it in a different place, on grilled chicken or grilled fish, through some roasted vegetables. You could toss it through grains like couscous, or in the case here with gnocchi, you could put it through pasta, through risotto, stir it into scrambled egg. So many uses. And I guess our point is always to arm people with the power to have the confidence to twist it and make it personal. There is no one perfect recipe for anyone. So for us, it's less about passing on recipes and more about empowering and enabling confidence in a kitchen with a few frameworks. One other example I wanted to share with you was when we went to an academy in Leeds a few years ago. Now, given they're an academy, they didn't have to stick to government curriculum. And as a result, we were able to get into the school and post one lesson with them. And this little video will show you a tiny snapshot of that.
Today we're going to tackle soup, which is a very, very simple dish, but it's not a recipe we're going to teach you. We're going to give you a whole bunch of basic skills.
And you can see the look on the kids' faces when we started, not exactly enthused. This was extracurricular. They didn't see at this point the value of it. Going back to what is craved, they didn't see the value in it. In fact, they were slightly bored by the idea. But we carried on. We moved into the classroom and we used all the things we know. We kind of began to explain to them the value of it and why it was durable and functional, why it was enjoyable, why it was accessible, and why it was conversational. And we went in as kind of friends to share that insight. And we gave them this formula. And you might think a formula is even worse. It's maths and science and people hate formulas. But for us, it was a framework and a template. Soup equals A plus B plus C. A was the same for all the kids. It was onion plus garlic sweated off. So there were 20 kids and they paired up into 10 different groups. And across the 10 different groups, they came and gathered either red onion, white onion, or leek. They peeled it, diced it up, sweated it off in a pan with some garlic. And then they came to get B. And B was a whole table of vegetables. And they could choose any vegetable they wanted, about a cereal bowl, mounded, and one other flavour to go with it. It could be a spice or a herb. It could be a cheese or a nut, or in some cases, even some smoky bacon. It was entirely up to them. And we had carrot and parsnip and broccoli and mushroom. We had celeriac, which is a really ugly vegetable that most of the kids had never even seen. But we also had roasted pepper and tomato, you name it, so many combinations, frozen peas, tinned corn, so many choices. They all went back and put that into their pan with their A. And then they added C, which was 2 bowls of liquid, a stock, which was basically hot water out of a kettle plus a stock cube. And slowly but surely over the course of the sort of 30, 40 minutes in this classroom, you began to see change in the kids, because at the end of it, they came back to the table and there were 10 completely different soups. And yet they'd all followed the same framework, the same template. And you could see the penny beginning to drop, that we hadn't just taught them one recipe. There was a report a few years ago that said Brits on average know 6 recipes by heart, and that's it. Which means, if you think about it, you're repeating them every single week, day in, day out. Here, they realised that we had taught them not one recipe, not the 10 soups on the table, but pretty much an infinite number of applications that they could take home. And it really did resonate, as is obvious in the end of this video.
At first, when I saw the soup, I didn't think it was going to be that good. And I tasted it was very good, and Ben also liked it.
It's very good. It's good, isn't it?
Do you know what I love best? When the kid comes at the end of the lesson and says, Miss, can I have that recipe? Because I'm going to do this at home. Or they come the next day and they bash into the door and they say, Miss, I did that last night. I made it again. And I say, what did Mum and Dad think? Oh, they loved it.
My mum tried to make a soup with me, but I couldn't do it. So my mum gets sometimes angry because I mess up things. So now I'm going to tell her I made a soup.
And that really is the crux of getting through, we think, to engage a younger audience in food. Those 3 things that perhaps could be applied to the classroom. And I speak out of turn because I'm not a teacher, but applying those friendship values of trust and loyalty, and not preaching, but actually engaging through authentic and real conversations. Those friendship values have worked for us online for the last 10 years. And especially when we apply it to things that are craved, and those cravings should build up to something that is conversational, to the point where they want to carry on the conversation when they leave the classroom, whether it's with their fellow peers or take it home to parents or grandparents or family. And finally, not to teach recipes as such, but to empower through templates and frameworks that give people the confidence to do it their own way in the kitchen, because food is so subjective. Now, that's kind of the three takeouts that I wanted to leave you with. But there was also one other thing that I wanted to take this opportunity with so many members of staff and teachers and experts on the call, something that I would love to leave with you. And that's kind of what keeps us awake at night. And the reason we started doing what we're doing at Sorted. And that's the fact that, and forgive me for a moment, a bit of doom and gloom. We've heard it this morning from various people, and Henry and Simon, and the importance of food and nutrition. There is a huge imbalance when it comes to food and health, both at a national level with the National Health Service struggling through food-based illnesses, but also at a personal level. You know, how fit and healthy are we, and active? How active are our minds as well when it comes to continued learning? And then, of course, there's the consideration of what impact this all has on communities and the planet. I think there has been an awful lot of blame in the fact that young people are reaching adulthood without the skills to provide themselves with a balanced, nutritious diet. And a lot of the blame often falls on schools and the education system, which is hugely unfair, because we heard earlier in some of the polls, the restrictions and challenges that schools have in order to pass on this information. And not least, outside of the school system, you have this world and environment around us where most of the food that we will buy and consume is held accountable through supermarkets. Supermarkets are the gatekeepers to pretty much everything. And it goes without saying that supermarkets are driven by profit. So they're squeezing margins from producers at one end and encouraging people to buy more at the other. Even if there are reductions or special offers or loyalty schemes, ultimately supermarkets want us to buy more food, which is not great. So we think there has to be a solution, and that solution is a tool, something that a digital native audience will already find practical and useful in their pocket, something that's digital so that it's scalable, but something that is on the side of the normal person, us, as opposed to the big brands who are trying to sell you more, something that ultimately could save money whilst also inspiring a generation through food to cook and eat better. And we think we have built a tool that kind of does that, and it's already being used by thousands of people every single month to change midweek cooking. So it was built and tested over the last couple of years with our audience, and I would love to share it with you now for two reasons. One, straight off the bat, it may be super useful to you, fellow staff, parents, and even the kids themselves, to inspire better cooking at home so they can take it from the classroom and move it home. It's completely free for a month, and even beyond that, the £1.25 a week more than pays for itself through food waste that you'll be saving. But the second question I would love to leave you with is, how can this tool, something that we have built and we've got all the hard work done, how can it be more helpful with the national curriculum? How can a tool that helps and guides people through cooking be more useful in schools with the limited resources that I know you have and have been spoken about so many times this morning? So this final video, just 2 minutes, explains a bit more about what the tool is. And then I would encourage you to, the next week or so, go and download it and have a play and see if you can find ways that it's more useful for you and for your fellow peers and teachers in schools or parents, or perhaps get back in touch with us to find out how we can make it more relevant for the national curriculum.
Okay, I'm guessing this is a question you get asked a lot, and there are plenty of ways in which you could respond. Boring. Oh, all right, big spender. That's just silly. Just say, I've got it sorted. Look, you're not alone. We've got club members who use Sorted to help transform their weekly cooking routine around the world. Let us show you how by opening one of our Sorted meal packs. Inside, you'll find a selection of meals that have been developed together and share a single shopping list. Just select how many to cook for and you're good to go. Every pack is designed to help you buy less. To do this, your pack ingredients will be split into two sections. Number one, your staples. This is a set stock list that all packs will tap into. We'll let you know when you need to refill. 2, your weekly shop. A list of fresh ingredients that your meals will share to reduce your basket size and give you delicious variety in the week. Your pack will also help you reduce waste. By following packs, you will only buy what you need and eat everything you buy. Plus, you can shop your way. We fill your basket, but you can choose the budget, source, and how much food you buy in plastic. Now, with everything stocked, you're set for the week. Let's start a kitchen guide and get your ingredients laid out. When you're good to go, then just let us guide you around the kitchen so you can effortlessly cook hands-free.
Let's get started. Take your red onion and cut it into a fine dice.
And 1 pepper. We'll use the other one later in the week.
That goes into the oven for 15 minutes.
Not only are timers set throughout the guide, but washing up tips are included, so you can also multitask stress-free.
So now is a good time to wash up your knife and peeler.
If you're looking to substitute an ingredient or want a new version of the dish, then check the approved twists for some inspiration, or you could even submit your own. Whatever happens, you'll have an incredible meal on the table and a clean kitchen every day you cook from a pack. By joining the club, you can add 1 new pack every week from our carefully selected club menus. Add them to your library, start building a collection, and select your favourites so you can use them whenever you like. So what are you cooking this week?
It goes without saying that that product has been developed for midweek cooking at home, but we are pretty certain it could have huge use and benefit in the classroom as well, to support teachers who perhaps don't have all the tools at their disposal, and to use it in the hands of this digital native generation who love to get involved. But I'm going to hang around for some Q&A at the end of the whole session, but otherwise, thank you very much.